Alright, making a video and such. Sorry. It's a crappy mood. So I'll do a little philosophy for 2 minutes or so. Just really, life is just can get so nasty. And, there's a lot of people who have kids, they're young, so they don't really see it, But there are people that have kids when they're older, and you're saying they should have some appreciation for just how messy life can get. And, once things go south, they can go really south. And so anyway, my life is falling apart in some respects, and since, I've lived in a town for 50 years and I have to move, and, and I'm an agoraphobic, which is, makes that a rather shocking thing to have happen. And just the logistics of, taking 40 years in one location and trying to, figure out what part of your life you can take with you. So dismal. But, this kind of crap happens to people every day. And I've been, overall, I've been very lucky to have what I've had in my life. Because, it could have been so much worse. The difference between me being lucky and people being in mental institutions. And, just trapped in their psychology and never get out. And just, you just contemplate that for a couple of seconds even, and it just says to you, this is just so dirty, so messy, so unsatisfactory. Why would anybody presume to know for somebody else that it's a risk worth taking? I mean, the whole idea of people gambling with my welfare, in a sense, saying, oh, I know it's best for you. I'll subject you to this risk. I mean, I have advantages in the sense of having some perception of just how stupid existence is, in the sense that I've been unsettled and uncomfortable most of my life. I mean, it just happens to be the kind of personality I have. I'm just not, I resist evil and stupidity and waste and risk. I resist it. I don't go looking for it. I fight it. And this is not a good get along strategy for the way we have created our civilizations. This is the loser strategy. You will not defeat City Hall kind of stuff. If that's your ambition, you're in big trouble. So yeah, it's all been kind of obvious to me because it's such a pie in the face, a shit pie in the face. But it still surprises me that people are so clueless. That there isn't moments in their life where they say, oh, what if it stayed like this forever? What if I had the flu forever? Or something. And they can't just really appreciate that, oh yeah, that must be what it's like to be insane. That might be what it's like to, and they just take these risks. And it's just so frivolous and stupid. But again, it's fighting City Hall. People are just so stupid. There's no... And that's what I'm interacting with and seeing, that this is why things are shitty, is because people are shitty. They're just got shit for brains. So anyway, enough philosophy. Superior mind. Like what you're saying about the basketball leasing. Okay, maybe you should have just stopped there. Another way I thought of putting it, that's always dangerous, because there's some chance that you'll put it better. I mean, you have on occasion done something added value, but often you just convolute. Is when you have velocity, it's like the sum of vector units. Well, of course that's what it's like. Yes, exactly. But people don't know what the sum of vector units mean. It means you collect momentums from different things, and they have to wash out. You only hold so much, and you're going to hold the imbalances. So, it just adds up to how many rocks hit you from one side and how many hit from the other side, and your body essentially calculates that figure and says, in my life I've been hit by 17 more going this way, so I have 17 worth of energy points going in this direction. So that's another thing, the energy word, because the D. Hilster guy, who I'll play a clip of at the end here just because he's an idiot, he also said something idiotic in his room again, how energy, there's no energy, and it's just a concept. When clearly, you just go logically through what energy usually means. And you can use hot and cold, you can use up and down in terms of being in gravity, a change, a difference in potential. I think the best thing to use is pressure. Pressure is the most obvious way to understand. There's no energy when things are in equal pressure. There's no energy potential. You can't make something happen. But when things are on unevenness is where you get this idea of what energy is and how we can measure it and how we can make something happen. So the argument would be kind of simple, is that there's a lot of energy in an atom in the sense that it's pressurized. And, there's potential to release that pressure, quite obviously. Now, if the atom didn't have pressure, you wouldn't say an atom had energy. It's that kind of logic. So energy is a real thing. You're describing a real difference between particle A and particle B. So in a sense, you could say there's innate energy potential between electrons and protons. Now you have to understand what makes the energy work is the force. Obviously without the force they're not going to move into each other. So there are pretend notions, that the charge is some kind of innate property. It's an innate property, but it doesn't do anything unless you have the force making it do it. So that's sort of obvious. But there's a real thing. This concept of energy isn't just a concept, it's a label for a phenomenon. And the phenomenon is extremely real, not fake. And it comes down to motion in many respects. How much motion there is in something, potential to move. Anyway, so related to what he's saying, a sum of unit vectors, which is a sum of pressure units, essentially. When you appear to be stationary on the rotating Earth, well, you're always stationary, relative to something else. There could be such a thing as stationary in the universe, but we don't know exactly what that thing might look like or where it would be. There are the unit vectors of force down as well as the repulsive force pushing you back up. Well, they don't exactly do it at the same exact time, but yes. Not to mention bits of lateral force, like wind, I guess. So a person in spacesuit who appears to have a lot of velocity, tricky, could have the same sum of unit force vectors as the person who feels as though they are stationary. The person who, in the spaceship, who has velocity isn't feeling anything either. You don't feel velocity. Velocity means it's already been done to you. Okay, the acceleration, the change. So in real terms, I'm arguing that obviously while you're accelerating you have a velocity, but obviously if you're still under acceleration you feel acceleration. That's why we feel gravity. And so when you're being accelerated you will feel acceleration, because that's the changing part. Change you feel. Once you've established a steady state, you don't feel it anymore. Okay, we actually may have, if the car never hit a bump on the road, you wouldn't really know the difference between going 100 miles an hour or 200 miles an hour. Once you're going that speed, all your stuff is caught up and all the bits are moving the same speed. It's when you're being jiggled and jostled as the mathematics is being conducted, that's when you feel it. Just another way of saying exactly the same thing with the school of fish. So again, it's the school of fish really doesn't do acceleration versus velocity, and those are semi-important distinctions. But obviously there's disruption to this. If the school of fish is consistently moving in a way and it has a certain pattern that has it moving that way, obviously the introduction of new fish, it'll take time to change the momentum, the speed, the velocity of the school of fish, because that fish has to essentially communicate the change throughout the whole structure and create a new pattern. But once you have the pattern and it's sustained as a sustained velocity, then the pattern is unsensible. You're not going to sense that velocity. Alright, so Mike Buell says as a joke, some more than others, so quoting me, so yeah, a little shot at half a day, but keep those to a minimum if can. Alright, so this guy, Edward Solomon, I don't know who he thinks he is, but whatever. Pretentious rubbish. Alright, there. Oh. What? 3 are 3 models. So I guess he meant there. There are 3 models. Said 3 are 3 models. Exclusive, whatever that means. That explains the mechanism behind the universal forces. It's just nonsense, but whatever. I mean, what are the universal forces? First off, are you talking about 4 or 3, or what forces are you including? And they don't have a model of most of the forces. They don't have anything. Alright, push, which assumes a universe full of fluid, which is just nonsense. You don't need fluid. If I throw a rock through a window, it pushes a hole through the glass. There's no fluid necessary. In a manner which the author of the video discussed in the opening when discussing Newton. The author of what video? I don't even, I don't think this is a comment video. I don't know what he's talking about. Newton wasn't committed to ether, so let's not pretend he had any confidence at all about mechanism. He didn't. In this scenario, the universe has no empty space, and its size is infinite. Well, again, I don't see how anybody could even know anything about the size of it. That's just pure, grotesque, uneducated guesses. That doesn't mean anything. There's no knowledge base from which to glean information about the size of the material universe, or the force universe, or whatever you want to call it. That's just complete rubbish. 2. Pull, which assumes all matter moves along an abacus of interconnected threads. Grady. So again, I've never even heard of anybody else with any such theory before Bill Gates. So I don't know what you're talking about. What physicist held this thread theory before Gates? Subject to basic Newtonian laws of motion. I don't know how they would exactly be subject to those, because obviously by those laws all the threads would break because of the amount of tension they're under. In this scenario, the universe is mostly empty space. I don't know how it could be empty if there's frickin' threads all over the place, and is finite. So again, how could they even figure out how finite it is? I guess it would have to be finite, obviously, but you can't have an infinite number of threads. That doesn't really make any sense. I mean, somebody should be able to figure out that infinities and small spaces are kind of a game breaker. Such a universe is also, by consequence, deterministic. Well, again, whether something is deterministic, I don't think has anything to do with which one of these you choose. They can all be understood as determinism because they're all got rules. So, determinism is only broken when you say something stupid like there's magic, or God, or the universe somehow makes completely spontaneous and erroneously sourced errors of some kind. Also, the Gates pull model is the only model which naturally implies Mach's principle, which is just complete nonsense. But anyway, so I guess he's attempting to defend Gates' bullshit, which is just bullshit. I mean, just absolute crap as a fucking concept. It's completely insensible. You'd need a whole nother level of physics just to analyze the physics of these stupid threads going everywhere, from everything to everything. How does all the how am I not being completely disrupted by all the threads getting broken when a comet moves through the space or something? It's just idiotic. Alright, 3. Virtual reality, which assumes the universe is a simulator, which is just an insanely unevidenced assumption. And consciousness is a factor in rendering reality, which can't possibly make any goddamn sense. I mean, our consciousnesses are so weak and so feeble. They're just confused little whiny robots. I mean, it's just silly to say it. Oh yeah, our consciousness is making reality. What a pile of crap. And obviously, how can my consciousness make a reality that your consciousness ends up having to live in? That doesn't make any sense. Tom Chambell and his slit experiments, whatever that means. That doesn't even make any sense, but whatever. The size of the universe is infinite. Fuck you. Countable. I don't know. How does countable and infinite go together? Since any finite size could be extended by a conscious being. I don't... how crazy are you? And rendered by a finite set of turning instructions. So again, just complete gibberish. That still wouldn't be infinite. In this scenario, there also exists absolute time, speed of processor. Yeah, well, in all scenarios, you're stuck with that one. There's just no rational sense to not appreciating the fact that time is static. I don't know, he didn't have all this. He must have edited this comment. All this other crap wasn't here. Yeah, edited. So he's added all this new crap. Since Mach's principle is not implicit in Model 1 push and Model 3 simulation, then Getty's proposal is the one that should be considered for time being. Well, that's your silly opinion, you silly kook. Getty's rope hypothesis is also compliant with all 11 tenets of Mach's principle. Oh, let's go look and see. I forget what this whole Mach's principle shit is. In theoretical physics, primarily in discussions of gravitation theories, Mach's principle, so again, Mach gravity takes care of the principle, is name given by Einstein to an imprecise hypothesis often credited to physicist and philosopher Ernst Mach. The idea is, so they're finally getting to the idea, it's so stupid, right? Is that the existence of absolute rotation, completely nonsensical concept even to consider any obligation to rotate anything, the destruction of local inertial frames versus rotating reference frames is determined by the large-scale distribution of matter as amplified in this anecdote. You are standing in a field looking at the stars. Your arms are resting freely at your side. You see the distant stars are not moving. Now start spinning. The stars are whirling around you and your arms are pulled away from your body. Well, gee, duh. And you don't need any principle to figure out what's happening. Why should your arms be pulled away when the stars are whirling? Isn't that amazing? Why should they be dangling free when the stars don't move? I mean, I didn't know Mach's principle was an insane pile of absolute crazy rubbish. Oh, man. Just amazing. Sorry, I didn't know this guy was as big a nutter as he is. Alright, then is the one that should be... Okay, right. Mach 0. The universe, as represented by the average motion of distant galaxies, does not appear to rotate relative to local inertial frames. We can't tell what the universe is doing, so that's just completely made up. We can barely understand what galaxies are doing. And frankly, I don't think they do understand, in the sense they've drawn the conclusion that galaxies have contracting gravity, when I think what they obviously have is expansion. Galaxies are falling apart, not growing stronger. They're getting weaker, not stronger. Newton's gravitational constant G is a dynamical field. Well, obviously it's not. The constant is just a way of putting the force into something you can compare to other things. There is no gravitational constant that means anything. An isolated, it's just telling you how many newtons the force adds up to. An isolated body in otherwise empty space has no inertia. Unless it's been already acted on, then it does have inertia. So that's more just nonsense. So yeah, obviously if you start with no universe and you place something in the universe, like an electron, I would argue it has no momentum until a force acts on it. Local inertia frames are affected by cosmic motion and distribution of matter. Well, I don't think you have a shred of evidence that any of that's true. The universe is spectrally closed, whatever that means. The total energy, angular linear momentum in the universe are 0. Yes, that's exactly right. Obviously, I would argue that it has to be balanced. or we'd be sensing a huge imbalance somewhere, right? So, I mean, it is theoretically possible. The whole universe is moving 10 zillion miles an hour, but there's no reason to think so. And what's kind of obvious is that you have to capture energy. And all you're doing when you capture, it's like the pressure argument. If there's high pressure somewhere, there's low pressure somewhere else. So if you're making the pressure inside of an atom, for example, out of force, out of an idea of force, well, then you had to lose force somewhere else to do that. And so wherever you make a high pressure, you make a low pressure. If you're trying to make a vacuum, you have to, you have to push more crap into the atmosphere. You have to pull the stuff out and pull it somewhere else. So there's always that obligation for it seems reasonable to assume the initiation of the universe is a balance, and the imbalance is created by the fact that as the bits start to consolidate, they start absorbing pressure. And as they absorb it, that means it doesn't go where it was going. That means something else gets low pressure and the things start accelerating towards each other. So gravity is the first force, and it is creating imbalances in pressure. It's a defined number, so U equals 4 pi times GT squared. Well, this 4 pi thing is another thing under debate, right? Because the 4 pi thing is based on a doubling of the force on photons, so I don't know if I'd trust that little bit of formula. I mean, the density of matter in the universe in T is the Hubble time. Yeah, whatever. The theory contains no absolute elements. Well, except for G and the time and pi, those are absolutes, but whatever. Overall, rigid rotations and translations of our system are unabsorbable. So anyway, I don't see how this has anything to do with anything I'm discussing. The conflict between conventional rubbish, virtual photon, fake bent space, bullshit physics, and a rational understanding that all the forces have the same speed, which implies they're the same damn thing. And then when you start to really look at it, you can see how they are all the same damn thing. Magnetism is just a conversion of gravity into a dipolar force. It's just segregating a force, and thereby creating all kinds of potential for very interesting pressure interactions. So I don't see any obligation to keep this pile of crap on this board because it's all just bullshit. There's nothing in this that has anything to do with any proven fact or any experiment. I'd like to argue experiments, not bullshit notions and crap you quoted from no one that you're citing as an authority. There's no authorities on these subjects. Whatever. Suck your mum. Well, I don't do mums. Apparently you do, though, right? You've probably been, licking your mom's anus for 30 years. So, whatever. Arnold ass, umbrella-less. Arnold ass. Arnold ass. He's talking shit. Yeah, no surprise. Fly Aura, very strange. I haven't seen her in so many years. Very, she does have peculiar interests and study points, so just kind of funny. So she brings up Pauli's exclusion principle for a completely unknown reason. I don't know why she would just pull that out of her hat. But anyway, she says, I really admire your critical thinking skills. Well, I think it should be my argument skills, if anything. But whatever. I mean, I don't know. This whole idea of critical thinking in the hands of assholes doesn't add up to anything. So I really don't want to be part of the critical thinker club. This is a club full of unreliable tinfoil hat loonies. Lots of people call themselves skeptics and this and that, and they're really just truthers. So anyway, so I don't know, like I said, I don't know the exact motivation of her question. So anyway, but this gets into all the Dirac kind of bullshit and the whole, the stuff they've invented. So you go back to even de Broglie and the idiotic notion that things with a velocity, they have now decided to call it, their velocity is a frequency. So they can now compare something's momentum based on their sourcing it to light, because there's some idea that there's an energy difference between ultraviolet light and infrared. So frequency somehow makes something innately more energetic when it really doesn't. There's nothing innate about it. The bullets you fire at half-second intervals are just as powerful as the bullets you fire at 1 second intervals. The only difference is obviously in 1 second you can fire 10 bullets versus 5. That's one difference, so there's more quanta in the 10 bullets. And the other obvious point would be is that it depends on what you're shooting to accomplish. If you're trying to tip something, well then you have to have the right frequency, the right resonance. You have to keep hitting it when it's moving the right way to have your energy add to the force of the wobble versus subtract from it. So if you want to constructively interfere with something, you have to have the right frequency. If you want to create a reservoir of resident energy. So anyway, this gets, like I said, this gets very complicated, but the Pauli exclusion principle is just some simple, like, it's not a principle. It's just, and it's not even in any way complex in the sense that this idiot is basically just saying that in an atom, right, or any other quantum arrangement, it's like saying that the points on the circle, if you made them into arrows going in a direction, you could automatically know that he's basically just saying 2 points on the circle can't have the same vector. Duh. And then they hide it in some kind of notion of exclusion principle in the sense that then they make up a bunch of other properties they say they can't have in common. So they can't have 4 unique factors in common. Well, they'll never have their exact position and their momentum vector in common. They'd have to be in the same location in space to have that. So yes, they can't occupy the same space. So in a sense, Pauli's exclusion principle is just saying 2 particles can't occupy the same space at the same time. But other parts of quantum mechanics don't want to say that, which is the funny part. So they decided to give electrons all kinds of, they gave it a wave function. So it has a speed, it has a direction, technically, at any one moment. Just like the Earth has a velocity vector without gravity, and then a velocity vector with gravity, and those 2 vectors are different. And electrons have the same thing. And then they gave them spin, which is just another made-up notion of electron history, you could almost argue. But it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with spin. It just has to do with what the electron's current imbalance is in terms of what's the constituent energy it possesses. Does it have 3 things going this way and 2 things going this way? And then if you add 1 bit of energy this way, would be different than if it has 5 momentums this way and no momentums that way, and they're always going to be different. Well, anyway, so it's just a meaningless pile of rubbish. It goes to the Dirac nonsense. It gets into this whole antiparticle crap, which is all just bullshit. It goes with this silly annihilation crap. I mean, annihilation is just such a disgusting word for them to use, because when they say something annihilates, this is what they're saying happens, which is just idiotic. So this is how they understand it, which is just pointing out how idiotic it is. They say this electron comes into a positron. Now they should be attracted, technically. But I don't even think they have evidence of that. But anyway, but the point is as I've pointed out, there's always a minimum amount of pressure between them. So if they get really, really close to each other, they won't hit each other. They will reflect. So anyway, so what they're saying is annihilation works like this. The 2 things hit, turn into stupid little photons, right? So you have to believe that an electron, which is gigantic in terms of its momentum potential compared to a photon, that the electron and the positron turn into gamma ray. And they don't even, like, they can't say 1 gamma ray. Somehow it has to be 2. because somehow they don't add up to calculate the momentum correctly. So this is the whole energy problem, right? Because they've given this energy thing to a photon that has no mass, which doesn't make any sense. How can something that has no mass have any momentum? So they've so broken the logic here. Well, anyway, to get to the point, what they're saying is this is what they're calling annihilation. And I won't even get into the borrowing from the future thing because I don't think I need to. But they actually have a concept that it borrows the energy from the vacuum and then gives it back later. It borrows energy anyway from a vacuum. It goes to a bank that doesn't have any money and borrows money. Anyway, so the electron and the positron hit each other. They turn into a gamma rays, two gamma rays, and then the gamma rays annihilate back into an electron and a positron, right? Well, what's the necessity of any of that nonsense? When the truth is what really happens is when they push into each other, they create a lot of pressure, all right? And the pressure coming in, the velocity coming in will be reduced, their velocity will be reduced, they'll stop, and then they'll accelerate away from each other. And in that process, they might lose some momentum and excrete a photon because of the energy between them is going to be vibrating and it'll be released like a photon. So you could see a photon. But you won't see that whole interaction anyway because we can't see the whole interaction. So that's the fraud of this whole thing. They never collide a single electron into a single positron to see it. None of that ever happens. They send 1 billion of them at another billion, and they let them collide 14 million. They smash them around in a circle and let them hit each other a whole bunch of times because they always miss. They miss most of the time. That's why the damn thing is circular. The whole thing is circular because you need to do a circular accelerator if the particles miss each other, because then you can just keep circulating them into each other. You can keep, one group is spinning this way, the other group is spinning this way, and you can keep smashing them through each other. The whole thing is just such crap. I didn't realize the LHC, I thought they made new tunnels, but it was really the tunnel from the old positron-electron collider, right? And I have done some research trying to find, just because of this positron thing that I say is bullshit, some evidence that they had some way of making positrons. And I couldn't find any sourcing beyond making them out of protons. Okay, so, so you make anti-electrons out of protons? Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway. It just sounds like complete shit. Gary, you are very intellectually gifted. Well, whatever. It's not a gift. You have to earn it in life, unfortunately. I mean, earn it in the sense that I'm not saying I did it because I'm a robot and I didn't know any better. But I'm just saying you have to live a life where you're uncomfortable and irritated to be motivated to do something about something, and means that instead of watching movies and cartoons and just wanking and stuff, I had to actually spend time reading crappy papers and looking at shitty videos and being bored and irritated. So you do have to earn it. If one examines your videos devoid of bias, they are actually top tier. Well, they do seem to be getting top tierier in my opinion too, because obviously I have a, as the theory has evolved. Like, see, the really tricky part is, I start off just juggling 3 things, and then I started juggling 7, 10 things. And so it started getting rough, because I'm juggling a lot of concepts and trying to have intelligent conversation on a lot of subjects. And, I just wasn't fluent enough in all of them to be able to do that as I think competently as I can do now, because I know the distinction between what is a real theory, what is real evidence, and stuff that's just theoretical. And that's the real problem. So you read a Wikipedia page, they don't, when they describe something, they don't make distinctions between theoretical proofs and experimental proofs. And they certainly don't give you very good data regarding what an experiment actually does and how it's actually conducted and what the actual results are. So the funny part too is they do mention the two-slit experiment. Whenever they talk about any of this bizarre particle theory, and they want to give wave attributes, they always cite the two-slit experiment. It's just so funny to me personally, just because obviously I think that's very weak evidence of any wave theory. Anyway, you are probably the one person on YouTube calling Ken on his hopefully unwilling deception. Well, I mean, it's obviously a passion for him in the sense that he's committed to some notion of reality that I can't possibly relate to, in a sense. And he has some, he uses words like metaphysics. I mean, he has some notion. He certainly doesn't seem to have any kind of God notion, like there's some positive force that's going to make everything all right. Because I think he knows that's bullshit. But it certainly has an awful lot of flying unicorns and glitter farts and kind of shit in it. I understand the want for ether theories. I just can't imagine what it is. I don't. It just stuns my brain. Just thinking back to my education and the moments when I became completely distrustful of physics is when it started talking about ethers or mediums and all that kind of crap, because it just makes no sense. It's a wave in a field. Field of what? What are you talking about? If they could maybe make their ether out of dominoes, but nobody does that. I mean, just because the geometry can't work. If you make it out of dominoes, you can't have straight line paths to a lot of locations. It always would have to be, the domino rays would have to jump. So you can't have any independent motion. Everything has to be on that grid work, and the grid work wouldn't make any sense. You'd end up with diagonals. So it's like if it was a true checkerboard can't work, because a true checkerboard creates longer lines this way than this way. And it can't do that. So a particle ether fails on the geometry argument alone. It can't do gravity. It can't do the inverse square law appropriately. It breaks down because it changes the distance, the amount of particles hit. It just doesn't, it doesn't make any sense. Alright, anyway. I understand the want for ether theories. Again, I just can't get that. Why do people think it makes more sense to have this idea of things banging into each other versus just throw something? If I want to get to point A to point B, why do I need to do it by all of this handing the thing off? Like, I give the rock to one guy and he hands it to the next guy and he hands it to the next. Why would I bother with all that nonsense? Why wouldn't I just throw the rock to point B? Anyway, I understand the want for ether theories, but people are better off reading ether material from real university or PhD students that have an interest in the theory. Well, again, I don't see any point in doing that, because that's just mathematical mumbo jumbo, and that ends up with the Einstein bullshit of, well, we can have an infinite gravity. Well, because gravity's not a real force, so we can make up anything that we can draw in a geometric mathematical notion, and we can have infinite lines, we can have infinite divergences, we can have infinite things. So that all breaks down. And who will concoct much better models and experiments to prove it? Well, I don't see how they're doing any of that. Again, they can't even accurately describe the two-slit experiment. Simplest experiment you can get, and they can't accurately talk about it or describe what it does and why there's differences between photons and differences between electrons and buckyballs and radar and water. Why they're not all the same thing. This is a completely different pattern for a completely different reason. Well, not completely different. I mean, obviously the geometry of phase is always going to be the same. The question is why are things out of phase? And how they get out of phase? And it seems quite natural that they would be out of phase, and there'd be a consequence to being out of phase. But clearly in the light example, it happens at the source. The light never goes to the it never goes through destructive interference. It only constructively adds. See, that's the gimmick here, right? Constructive interference just means you add. That's it. Not complicated. Destructive means you have to somehow destroy. You have to get rid of a positive force. You can't do that. Not possible. Alright, so let's get rid of it. We don't need this Mach thing anymore. Complete mush. Alright, so let's play this little bit of deholster. Hopefully there's enough volume.
Get on stage. But anyways,
yeah, maybe I can make a little more. So, I mean, he's got this stupid, this growing earth thing. It's just so badly evidenced. And, he earlier in this video, you made some rationalization about if you put mud on a balloon that's half blown up, and then you blow the balloon up further, that somehow the mud will break and create mountains. I mean, it's just nutty. I mean, I'm just going, that whole deNu effect with the spinning things in water. And as I've pointed out, look at that. And you'll see he's putting in tons of energy to get the water moving. Tons and tons of energy getting the water moving to create a tiny bit of attraction. So you'd have to believe, again, that the strength inside, like of a motor turning or any kind of magnet, that there's 1,000,000 times more energy swirling around the magnet. If we could just somehow tap that huge stream of particles or ether or whatever it is, this swirling stuff, if we could just tap that swirling stuff, we could have 1,000,000 times more energy out of the magnet. I mean, it's literally 1,000,000 to 1, the ratio of energy he put in versus attraction he got out. It's just, on its face, this can't be the answer.
Adam, do it.
That's probably too loud now. Okay, it's always something. Oh, God, I hate being alive.
You need to have more people talking about it. Maybe you'll have your model and you talk about it and make your own YouTube channel. So
okay, let me change the speed.
The model triathlon or the model Olympics. And the winner will be the next paradigm shift.
Alright, so that's another disgusting concept in my idea, in my opinion. Just to talk about something like it's a paradigm shift just trivializes it. Okay, I mean, evolution, Darwin's theory, wasn't a paradigm shift. It was the end, Adine. Okay, it was the story, the truth. We discovered the truth. The shifting is done, the storytelling is done, the bullshit is done. It's over. There, no more bullshit about how we got here. And the evidence is ginormous. It's there's not going to be a paradigm shift that'll somehow shift to something where evolution isn't the answer to origins. It's not going to happen. So to me, it's the last thing I want to be is part of any kind of paradigm shift. That's not, no. I want to be the finish shift, the done, where we accomplished, we did the job correctly. We picked up the rubbish and put it in the garbage can. We did it right. Okay, they just keep doing it wrong. They keep missing. The universe is pull, and they throw the garbage and it doesn't go in the can. Okay, it's not the right answer. So I want the paradigm shift where, yes, we now have the right answer. We don't have to shift anymore. Shifting is all done.
Crazy. There are a lot of people who don't believe that, and other YouTube channels, one in particular, that always puts a thumbs down on me.
So whatever that it means. I mean, I never thumb down your videos. I've thumbed down a couple of Ken Wheeler videos, to be honest, but that's it. So I don't play that game. And all I've pointed out to you is that your arguments are not strong. And when dissidents make weak arguments, that hurts dissidency. So I'm just saying, you really shouldn't assert something as a truth. You're claiming that you have overwhelming evidence that the Earth is expanding. You're saying, and you're saying that the counter theory is insanely weak or something. You're making assertions that you're not demonstrating. And then part of the evidence of my critique of you is the fact that, yes, you don't really respond to the pointed questions that are going to sit there and oblige you to explain. How did they breathe? How do you have a thick atmosphere and weak gravity? What happens to the oxygen? What happens to the boiling point of water, okay, without high atmospheric pressure? These are real questions.
I know who that person is, but they
this whole playing little girly game. I know who he is, but I'm not going to say his name because he's a poopy head. What is that? I mean, it's just more. If you're supposed to, the dissidents are supposed to be doing as a counter to their made-up fake authority. You're supposed to be doing let's be honest, let's tell the truth, let's fair cop the unfair cops. And that's not what you're doing here by playing little games. Yeah, we fundamentally disagree about key points of logic. And yeah, I think you're being grotesquely illogical, and to boot, you're exaggerating, and that should be something we all try to avoid. You're exaggerating your evidence. That's like one of the biggest crimes of conventional physics. They keep saying they've proven something when their proof is garbage.
They have their own theory, which is great. They're a critical thinker. That's absolutely good. I won't say the name because I'm not into talking about people. But basically,
yeah, right. It's just kind of silly. I'm not into talking about people, but I made a movie called Einstein Wrong about a dead guy who can't defend himself. It just somehow that seems like a duality of. That we could put into the generic term of a hypocrisy, or even duplicity.
A person says, "Oh, by the way, there's only one truth."
Yeah, there is truth. There's true statements. There's accurate statements and inaccurate statements, and that's all we really have. So sometimes you can't make a complete statement, but you can make an accurate one. So like Newton did, he said, "This is what gravity does. These are the principles in general that it functions under." To an exactness of, I don't know, maybe there's some hairs, that could cause some other effect. There could be some tiny other variant that causes little tiny changes. But yes, the basic idea is this is pretty reliable rules and laws I can give you about motion. And they're really accurate to a pretty high level of reliability. And that's all he said. Didn't say too much, didn't say too little. So those are good, factual, accurate descriptions of observed reality. Versus, what you do. Hyperbole.
You can only have one model. Like you only can have one human language. You can only have.
Yeah, you can't. Certainly, you do know the rules of logic, right? You took some philosophy in your college days. I mean, it's like the only rule, in my opinion, of logic is the law of non-contradiction. Okay, conflicting statements can't both be right. One, you have to fix it. One of them has to be wrong, or both of them have to be wrong. But you can't leave it that way. It's wrong. There's not two realities. So you think there's more than one reality, essentially. That's what you're arguing for. I'm just saying there's one reality, and that's what we're trying to describe. And if we have two descriptions that are conflicting, that is, they're saying something opposite about that truth, are incompatible about that truth, then there's a problem with our descriptions.
Your language, you only can have one type of planet. Guess what?
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what that means. One type of planet? Where did I assert you can only have one type of planet? I mean, it's just such a hilarious, just a bizarre notion. So because I say you can't have conflicting descriptions of the same thing, you can't say it's 6 feet tall and it's 3 feet tall. You can't say it's made of rock and it's made of jello. You can't say completely different things about what it is, its properties.
Everywhere, and there's a variety. How this universe is actually described could be described in different ways.
Yeah, and that's failure, in my opinion. If you're describing the same thing in different ways that are conflicting, you're failing. Now, if you want to say that you could describe water as wet and somebody else could describe water as flowy, those aren't conflicting descriptions, so that's not a problem. Flowy and wet aren't a problem. But again, if someone else says dry, well, now you have a problem.
Models, and we do that. Why don't we have one model for all of physics of everything?
That's, again, I just think that's, so again, you really didn't understand Einstein at all. But again, that seems what a logical man would attempt to do, is to get it right. Get the right answer. Not wrong answers.
Have equations for electronics, electric circuits. Why do we have the current equals I over R?
A bizarre example when considering that it was Maxwell who unified all those. so they were not in conflict with each other. So again, you're not giving me an example of two opposites. Ether versus no ether. That's a conflict. That's a duality. That's a position where they're asserting different things that aren't compatible. Quantum mechanics and relativity. They're just not compatible. I mean, one's a discrete force-based, virtual photon-based mechanism, and one's a geometry, no force necessary mechanism. Those conflicts are problematic, in my opinion. Hugely problematic. That's evidence of having the wrong answer, or having wrong answers somewhere. One or both of the answers is wrong.
Whatever that is. Sorry about that, Dad. But why do we have that? Why do we have equations for mechanical engineering? Why do we have the equations for Newton for buildings?
So again, how are they in conflict? So you really just don't get the idea here, right? Again, I've never stated that somebody can't, somebody can't say this tape, the dispenser is green, and then somebody else could say it's yellow, and somebody else could say it's black. I'm not saying those kinds of conflicts can't exist. Of course, obviously it's more green than any other color by volume. I think so anyway. Maybe, it's close, right? Black might, I don't know. Anyway, but clearly what I'm saying is there's one reality to be described. Somebody can't say it's pink. Pink wins. That ain't going to work. It's the wrong answer. The thing is a real thing. It's not this, it's this. And there's a difference between these things. And you can't just say somebody can go ahead and say this is this and this is this. They can't do that. That's garbage. You can't just make up anything. And you certainly can't suggest things are two different things at the same time. It's just babble.
Have equations for material.
It's an electron and a proton at the same time. I mean, that would be a nonsensical pile of rubbish.
So when you build buildings, you can calculate the weight stresses and the materials.
Again, where are any of those things in conflict with each other? Now, if you showed a conflict where the architectural engineering theories were in conflict with the thermodynamic theories or something, well, then you might be saying something. But there's no evidence of those things being true. That it is actually true, and then it's actually false. I mean, you don't have any of those examples. So what is this mush? And again, the whole thing you're fighting, conventional physics, is full of those dualities. That's why it's a failure. It's because it does make contradicting statements about things' reality. I mean, I was reading up on electrons and muons and taus, and I mean, it is such a pile of crap. Oh, anyway.
We have equations that are just basically ad hoc equations for putting together molecules.
They're not ad hoc equations. So again, these are worked on over time, a lot of them. So yes, I would argue that Dirac equations, all those convoluted relativity crap, all of that stuff is just bullshit. I mean, it's not complete bullshit in the sense arranged very precisely. The bullshit's in little nice squares, and they've stacked all the nice squares of bullshit into a nice little pyramid of bullshit. You know, over time, they've refined it so it looks like fancy bullshit. But it's bullshit, okay? So here you are throwing in the same bucket equals mc squared, or, you know, even Newton's F equals ma or something. You're throwing them all in the same bucket. They're not in the same bucket. Some are reliable facts that we can rely on, and they're going to be true forever. And some are just crap.
Because we don't have a good model of the atom, we still come up with a model that we can use. Why do we have calculations that we use that are special calculations just for doing things in space? All those kinds of things.
So again, you haven't shown me where these calculations assert a truth that conflicts with another truth, another asserted truth, or one that's been established as a truth. So without conflict, this is mush. Clearly dissidents have a ton of conflict. So they're all can't be right. You're just not getting that. So this notion that somehow it's possible that they're all right, saying it's pink, it's purple, it's puce. I mean, they have, you know, in my opinion, they have nothing but wrong descriptions. I mean, nothing but. None of them have a right answer. So, you know, there's not even a hope of getting to a truth. They're so far off the subject.
So that's why we can have things. CPEC has a model that is particles, ether, and lattice all in one. Matterdoc.info. What? That's what you do. It's, hey, you know what I call that? That's the tutti frutti theory. I don't say that in a bad way.
Yeah, and when you combine all of your dissidents, that's all you've got. Okay, it's a bunch of what do you call those little crappy things you sprinkle on ice cream? I mean, it's just fucking junk.
Duncan Shaw's ether theory, the Vancouver ether theory, because it was a here it is. Something concept presented explains physical laws.
Let's see, a unified theory that is applicable under all conditions to matter, material objects in all forms, is to be something. This desire clearly indicates that all is not well about current physical theories, hence something. But contemporary science has advanced too far on irrational assumptions, illogical. Okay, let's see if we actually get. I wish to present a radically different approach based on an alternative concept. Read and evaluate it, an unbiased mind. Oh, this is an awful lot of pre-writing. Concept given in the book Matter. Re-examine the logical explanation of physical related to matter. The book includes explanations. Well, anyway, it's supposed to be some sort of matrix ether particle theory. So that's just, you know, it sounds like junk food to me.
Huh. I've probably been here before.
Yes, scroll down, further down.
Matter. Alternative concept present in matter. I'm going to open this up, I'm going to get squashed. There we go.
Unified theory applicable under all conditions. Oh, we're still stuck in the same place.
Explains physical phenomena related to matter using just a single foundational assumption that substance is fundamental and matter alone provides substance to all real entities. I agree with that. One type of the basic matter.
So he never reads this stuff very well. Cannot naturally yield better theory. Finding better theory, we need to search outside orthodox realm of physics. So this is all just gibberish talk. I wish you'd just get to it.
Quantum matter derived from the assumption is required to explain all physical reality in the universe. Quanta of matter form an all-imposing universal medium that pervades entire space outside 3D. Author explains why. Well, of course, you know, people who have ether say, well, they have particles because ether's a particle. But that's different. You have to understand what a particle model means. It doesn't mean waves aren't transmitted like air pressure. It transmits waves, but
look, in my opinion, if somebody's willing to say that, if somebody's willing to say their ether is a bunch of discrete locations, okay, and they have the ether bit has to be insanely tiny, because obviously photons have to travel this ether. So the ether would have to be, a whole level of minuteness smaller than a photon to again have geometry that could allow photons to appear to travel straight lines. And it's sort of the checkerboard argument, right? It's like the pixels on a computer screen. You can't do certain lines, okay, without them getting all jittery, without higher resolution. So the higher, you have to have a lot of little pixel points to be able to display high grain. So the photon demands a hugely fine grain. So you'd have to have the screen mechanism has to have a capacity, a resolving capacity that would have to be insanely fine. So you're just talking like a billion or trillions or 10 to the minus 32 kind of dopey number of an ether particle that would have to be that finely grained for you to get photons that travel straight lines. You'd have to make the checkerboard with that many squares, that tiny a square on it, to avoid this diagonal line problem and all the rest of it. It just won't work. There's no geometry for your ether if it's a discrete bit in a discrete location in space. So I don't think a particle mechanism, an ether, can work because it won't be able to duplicate the dead straight lines that photons travel.
In a different way. Let's see. So the only thing I don't understand, this what gets me a little worried, is when I see things like this quantum of matter.
I mean, I suppose you could argue, let's say if you had an ether that was just half as small as the photon. See, this is the thing. You have to really think about all this stuff. Because somebody could come up, I was just saying, I could come up with a tinfoil hat explanation for that, though. And it would end up explaining redshift, right? Because you could argue that redshift is being caused because the photon isn't traveling a straight line. That it keeps, like say it's got to go from here to here, it starts off going a little bit off, and then it jumps to this line, and then it jumps to another line, and it jumps to another line, in the ether. And so it actually travels a curved path, in a sense, but we can't see it that way because of the fineness of the grain. The only way you would be able to see it is that it would have some effect on frequency or the speed, the actual speed of light. And we can't really tell the speed of light at great distances. We can just assume it. But anyway, the point is I think we kind of know that light is a pretty reliable ruler. As much as I don't like LIGO, clearly light can be made into a very good ruler. The dependability of its function, not as good a ruler as they think, but a good ruler.
They start to get then it gets to be nebulous. But I'm guessing, I don't know, if I do there's application of all conditions matter, which present radically. Oh, of course, of course, this guy.
All right, now see, he's going right through. Now the bullet points is where you should have stopped. You should have stayed on the bullet points. You should have stayed on the bullets. Hit the button, Gary. Oh, I missed number 1. Matter is unstructured state. In its unstructured state, has a tendency to reduce its existence to minimum spectral dimension. So this is obviously just more Ken Willer's silly shit. Somehow the matter has no magnitude until it's magnified. Because of this, a block of unstructured matter fragments into minute matter particles, quantas of matter, which is just no evidence of that, which strive to remain in single spectral dimension. I mean, so it's just more of this idiotic notion that there's some other thing. There's only 3 dimensions. There's 3 physical dimensions. Everything else is a function. There's no other place you can go. There's no magic land. There's no rabbit holes. There's no looking glasses. There's no access to any other bullshit worlds. Quanta of matter form 2-dimensional lattice-work structures in all possible realms or something. I don't know. So obviously this guy isn't getting it. The force is the underlying mechanism. The matter is just a slave to it. I mean, really. it is Star Wars in the sense that the Force is everything. The matter is just along for the ride.
This happened. Yeah, I know him. Yeah, I recognize his face. I remember faces. I don't remember names very well. By book of matter, examining gravitation. Okay. Yeah, he's in our database, I believe. I bet if we look this guy up, he's in our database. BARG.
A database of nutters, with all of them with some sort of wacky little vibrating, you know, they're jellyfish, their wavicles, their ether corpuscles, their solitons, whatever the fuck those things are.
I'll just put them in the wiki, because everything that's in the database should be in the wiki almost. Oh. That's what I'm saying, not everything is. We'll go to our database, which is a database.
Very exciting. So he's looking up a nutter, and he wants to see if the nutter's already indexed in his nutter index.
Sometimes we get that. There he is!
Very exciting.
There he is! Yes, we have him. Matter, ether, planetary motion. Yes, sir. He is from, is he India? Yeah. Electrical engineer! Yay! You're the best. Yes, sir.
Best at what? Yeah, sorry. They know what tin is, and they know how to make a hat out of it.
Oh, okay, so Steve Beck says the quantum of matter is the smallest bit. Of course, then, I'm your science therapist. Let me tell you, what do I tell you about ultimate particles? How do they organize?
It's as silly as saying why is there something instead of nothing. It's just a waste of time as a question. Obviously, because that's the way it turned out. Okay, the universe was apparently, it was possible for there to be something, so something happened. Yeah, unfortunately.
They organize. So that's why I believe in infinity. I don't believe there's a small particle.
Yes, infinity going all the way up and all the way down, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. And again, you can sort of see it, okay? There's no Horton here's a who thing going on. We know there's no Hoobies, you know, on the dust particles. And we can look at the big universe, and we can see it's missing all of the features, you know, of the subatomic world. All of the regularity that's in that world doesn't appear to exist in the bigger universe.
Gotcha. But he does. He'll be right. Maybe there's magical particles that make up the whole universe, and they magically hold hands and start doing dances on their own with no... The reason infinity works, folks, why does infinity work there is because any type of...
Yeah, so it's this whole idea, even the speed of light, you could understand that you really can't do this infinity thing, you know, because eventually you get to instantaneous, you know. You can't magnify those things, and you can't slow them down either and make much sense out of the universe.
Happen? Like if you have light particles that are coming into waves and waves of light, and it's white light, which are just clumps of particles that are random, and they hit a prism. Well, they hit a prism, they get filtered. The colors get filtered out because of the frequency. We have an explanation for that.
I think no, you have a story, and again, but a story doesn't make any sense because you create a whole nother force of magical gravity that moves twice, no, the speed of light squared. So you have a magical speed of light squared force that somehow gravitationally bends photons. Even though regular gravity doesn't bend photons, and even though you'll cite people who demonstrate that the evidence for gravitational lensing is incredibly weak, you'll sit there and assert that photons are affected by supergravity. And supergravity would be just as real as your first gravity. Again, I'll just say the obvious. This thing, say, blocks a force. A force hits it and can bounce off or be transmitted through it. Well, the same would be true for your supergravity that's affecting your force. It's going to find this opaque also. So, it's just saying there's twice as much gravity. And then you have to say, oh, wait a minute, there's an infinite number of forces. So the infinite number of forces are all being blocked by the opaque bits. So I should have an infinite amount of realized energy, change in pressure. You see, it just doesn't work. If you do a little thinking and spend a little time running it through your head, the flaws just fly out of your theory, David.
what happens is for light, for a prism to bend light, there has to be some other type of force. If it's a gravitational force at a low...
Yeah, there doesn't have to be some other kind of force. And we know, you know, I mean, it would just be kind of crazy to blame every time, by his theory, you'd need some third force for there to be gravity itself. I mean, gravity couldn't work without the third force somehow. I mean, it just is completely unnecessary. It's the same mechanism. The forces are all moving the same speed, and so clearly the interactions between electrons, or the interaction between electron and photons, are the same speed interactions, and there's a clear momentum exchange. So they clearly interact in a substantive way in terms of making force transfers, and if clearly they do it in the case of electricity, in the sense that they pass atoms. Atoms are necessary for electricity. The atoms pass the pressure. That's another thing with the whole Dirac crap and everything, is this whole notion. You know what they do when they have a thing called the magnetic moment, and they've created it for an electron, and they basically say that the electron is a dipole. So here they concede that it has a charge negative and protons are positive, and yet they say the electron creates a dipole moment. Somehow it's positive and negative. It's a dipole moment. Does that make any sense? When, logically, what you could understand is the electron has a position, and as it changes position, it would be blocking the proton force in an atom. And so the dipole moment would be if the electron moves either closer or further away, that would be a dipole moment, in the sense that more of the proton is revealed, and the electron becomes less important, so then there's a change or a shift in what you see. I mean, I've done this. I can block me from you, right? You don't see. I can block both my eyes there, right? And just by moving this, you can see that now I am big, and this is small. So just this little bit of movement. So if this was positive, right, and this is negative, you can sort of understand that just by changing this distance, this is a negative thing you're seeing overall, right? So if you were looking at me, this whole idea that's sitting here, you would see something different depending on where this thing is or how far away you are. But obviously you can't never fix when it's close. So it doesn't matter how far away I go, I'm not going to fix this, okay? There's just, I've blocked a positive, and it's a negative. So this is the dipole moment. The electron doesn't have it. It can only have a dipole when it is in the presence of a proton. It has to have some positive entity related to it. It can't create a magnet. It's a monopole. So I'm just saying, this is how, they have a very bad assumptions they've made about how things function. They're just as bad as the mistake that Benjamin Franklin made, labeling plus and minus. They did this idiotic Einstein thing where we're going to pretend there's no force, when there's obviously a force of gravity. I mean, it's just so bad. And these wrong assumptions lead them to more wrong conclusions. And it just ends up being a big pile of arranged bullshit. Nicely cubed bullshit.
Gravitons at the second level for the nucleons of atoms are using.
So again, he's using a word just doesn't have any nucleon, whatever the fuck that means. So these people just keep making up crap, and it's just like, you have to show me the evidence of the nucleon.
The particles will go around that, but there's a two particles, super small, going c squared, this is super fast. And that's what makes that curve. And then if that one's doing itself, it just keeps going down and down. So you can never...
So, and it would be subject to the same limitations of pressure. You just can't get around it. The radiation is going to get blocked.
Magical moment. Oh, I have to remember that. I never had a magical moment with infinity.
Thank you.
Lighting. Gosh, right. It really matters.
I certainly made those mistakes, but
That's amazing. magical moments. You can never have a magical moment. You can never have...
Well, you're suggesting you can. You can have the magic of conflicting descriptions of reality being true, which is a magical moment, in my opinion.
Magical moment. With infinity, you have a magical particle. I suspect that...
So again, this claim that somehow you can't explain all of this quite rationally without resorting to magical forces. Magical G2 unknown supergravity.
Continuity is continuity in existence. It could be what happens to be quantized is only the result of a cancellation of areas where a void seems to exist. Yeah, I mean, that can happen, but again, you still have to understand why is it there, why did it wave if it's not particle, if it's
Again, there's no true annihilation events. There's no such thing as negative energy. So you're always stuck with some real difference. There's always a difference. This is all there is. There's a difference. You can't have a negative difference. The difference is always a positive difference. I mean, even if it's minus 40 and then minus 60, it's still a positive difference.
Any parts, then is it infinitely dense? If it's infinitely dense, is it infinitely heavy? I mean, there's
people should, whoever says the word infinitely dense should be shot. There's no excuse for ever saying something that's stupid. There's just no excuse. No one should ever think, using a concept like infinitely dense, you should be able to get away with that. You should just be shot. I mean, there should be a rule here somewhere. I mean, this is criminal. This is a criminal violation of just the tiniest bit of logic, to use concepts like infinite density. It's just so fucking idiotic.
Problems with an ultimate particle. Same here, Dave. Infinity should be assumed unless it's somehow proven otherwise. It makes more sense. Yeah, it does. And also, I like it because all this idea of parallel worlds that you actually just have. There's a space for everything. For instance, our galaxy...
There's a space for everything, and the infinite number of chairs can be shoved into the house. No, they can't.
An ether particle, or a particle in a particle model, could be a gravitational, or it could be a ether particle, in a world where there's huge things and beings way up that we're just like one teeny part, and
yeah, so again, it's Horton Hears a Who. I mean, it's just a cartoon, completely made up of the imagination. I can imagine it, therefore it must be possible. No, that's not how it works. And again, a little bit of dissection will show you that this creates paradoxes. Just like their bogus relativity theories and stuff, it creates paradoxes. It creates problems that are unsolvable. I think energy equations can demonstrate that your sub-universes couldn't help but bleed into our universe as real force carriers, as real events. And there's just no accounting for it. There's no parallels. There's no, it's not a fractal.
Such a small infinitesimal instance in time to those things way up there that our galaxies are ether particles, and when they collide, they're transmitting waves that are seen by other beings at a super high level.
No reason to believe any of that mush. Just no reason to. There's no mechanics for it. The ether would be obvious to us. If there was an ether and we were on the subatomic level of the ether, we'd be able to see the fucking ether then. The galaxy ether. There'd be some evidence of the galaxy ether. And the only thing you could make it out of is our photons.
Inside chairs. I don't know. Alrighty. Anyways, guys.
Yeah, you're crazy, and it's time for you to go. Okay, good. Alright, let's see if there's anything else going on, and then we'll call it a video. This is so depressing. It's really, the whole thing is just going to be some tragic story in the end. In the sense that I was right, and I was kicked out of my house, even though I was a very nice, proper physicist and such, and I got, my life got ruined. So the whole thing will be just like all the stories. You know, every story has all those shitty pieces in it. You know, Einstein could have been a nice story, but you know, the whole, you know, screwing his first wife over and, you know, abandoning his kids, and, you know, he's just really sloppy bullshit that just makes you say shit. What a shithead. So the ignorant Prero, I saw him, he left some comment for the dissident science guy because he wanted to have a conversation with him, and the dissident science guy wouldn't do it, which is funny. And then he left a comment, oh yeah, on the thou art that. So this crazy guy who has this silly little Gaia love story of the universe, and Piro wants him to review his book, which has on its face a kind of loop-de-doo, deceptive, dishonest title of Illusions Exist, which is just crap. Yes, they exist as error code. That's what they are, error code. They're getting wrong answers, wrong impressions. It's what illusions are, is a misunderstanding. So misunderstandings exist. Yeah, great. That's what the world needs to know. That? No, the world needs to have a mechanism to escape the fact that we're blighted by illusionary thinking and delusionary thinking. You dumbass. Alright, so I think that's enough of a video now. Okay, well, thank you for your attention and such. And we'll move on to the next whatever. It's just crap on top of crap on top of crap. Again, I'm not, unlike fake Sagan, I don't have a tumor in my head. I don't have, but I mean, yeah, life is getting shitty. I don't like it. It's really, I was never comfortable, but I don't like being much more uncomfortable. And I'm dealing with it in the sense I haven't gone batshit crazy, but I'm feeling the bats. I'm hearing their wings flapping. I don't like it. I don't want to go postal. Anyway, until next time.